Hey, Rick, you know what's awesome?
What's that, Billy?
The Universal monster movies, the old classics.
Absolutely.
All right, so which ones did you get to pick out? Did you get to watch this time? Because there's a lot of them.
There's a bunch. I mean, I usually just go with the heavy hitters. Frankenstein to me still, and we'll get in this as we go. But I'm gonna watch Frankenstein regardless.
Mhm.
um, the Lugosi Dracula, Wolfman, some of the Mummy. I didn't get all the way through it. Wolfman, I know pretty well.
Mhm.
Invisible Man. You made some comments while we were talking about watching these about, yeah, man. I mean, wow. I mean, we'll get into that character as we go along for sure. And Creature
Well,
from Black
let's.
Lagoon, the original Creatures, man, is still just fantastic.
Well, I was gonna say, like, let's start because Invisible Man, he's obviously one of them, but he's probably a bit underrated. I mean, Dracula, Frankenstein, Creature from the Black Lagoon, they cast a pretty long shadow.
Yes.
So then, even the Wolfman, I think, kind of gets overshadowed by those big three.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I'd seen The Invisible Man all the way through ever. I'd seen clips and parts and bits, and you see them in documentaries and things like that. But to watch it from credits to credits, there's a few things that were striking. And the first one is that this is straight up a psychopath
Oh
horror
yeah,
movie.
without a doubt.
He's like, even whenever you have, like Dracula, he's classic evil.
Mm-hmm.
Frankenstein, he's tragic. The Wolfman, that's a curse, and the Invisible Man, like I said in that text, he's just a jerk. He's
Yeah,
like a straight up
absolutely.
jerk.
Yeah, and just maniacal, man. I mean, just he's the footprint for Freddy Krueger. I mean,
Well, he walks in and he's like, "Hey, I need a room," and he's a jerk to the people that are like, "Well, we don't have rooms." He's like, "Well, you can make one ready for me," and they're, for whatever reason, they're like, "Okay, we can do that." And he's like, "I want to be left alone, but bring me food." And so she brings him food, and he yells at her for it, and like, it's just like he's so. And I don't think maybe back in the day, I mean, his behavior was odd in the movies and stuff, but people were a lot more civil back then. Like, we
yeah,
didn't have all the angry cussing, bitching and moaning on the internet like we do on the internet now about every little thing, and people
yeah,
were, a bit more reserved and had etiquette, and there was a certain way polite society acted, and it was not like that.
right.
But his behavior was quite striking. I mean, he's right from the get go, he's nuts,
Yeah,
and you can tell. Um,
yeah.
so,
Just his whole demeanor through the whole thing, and it just he just gets crazier as he goes along. And say what you will, but even as a kid, I was always blown away by the effects in that one because you're going, okay, the monsters I understand. I see the dissolve on the Wolfman. How are they doing this? Right.
mhm.
So yeah, it's still pretty impressive.
Especially if it was in 33, like that's
Yeah.
the cameras had not been around that long for them to be able to
Yeah.
figure out how to come up with those kind of effects. And
Yeah. And you have to go back to the melee stuff, the German expressionism stuff. But some of the stuff that they pulled off in this was like pretty top notch.
I love how we don't have to go play by play, but just some of the cool stuff that he does. Like the wife, he's rude to the wife at the end, so she sends her husband, and that husband does not. He's a bartender. He doesn't want to go upstairs and mess with anybody. You got a weirdo living in your attic. He's like, I don't want to go mess with him. She's like, you need to go mess with him. So he goes upstairs and he tries. It's like, come on, man. You haven't paid. Like, here's all the reasons I got to kick you out, and the wife's on my ass, and you just got to go. And Invisible Man turns around and throws his ass down the stairs.
Yeah.
Just, like, as if that's not going to get the police called on you,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah. Go ahead and throw me out. I'm going to throw you out.
All I want to do is be left alone, but I'm doing all these things to get you to get more and more people mad at me so that they bring the noise. Oh, so cool though.
That was really pushing the boundaries for that time period too. I mean, the other ones are more gothic and have that feel to it, but like you said, just the whole demeanor of him in this is a madman, but it's a madman that is more realistic than a monster or whatever. So he's not totally just Renfield kind of crazy. He's like, oh yeah, watch this.
Watch me take off my clothes and totally disappear. I love that.
Absolutely.
Because especially like when he's messing with people, like he steals the bike and he knocks the dude's hat off, and he knows that he's doing this stuff just because nobody's gonna believe him. Like, it's an invisible man. The cop's like, you were drunk. Like, he's dismissing him out of hand. Like, he has him in a big old room, and he's like, what did you see? He's like, guy threw my head. He's like, how many drinks did you have? He's like, a few. He's like, you had a few drinks. You're drunk.
Right.
You threw my bicycle at me. Well, you're drunk too. Like, it was great. It's amazing to me sometimes you think about, this was kind of more noticeable in Frankenstein as well, but you forget like how much history has occurred between those movies and now. I mean, technology and cultural shifts and all that stuff. But it's like the sort of stuff that they were scared of making movies about, like it's all about science.
Yep.
It's about what will you do if you take this one experiment just a bridge too far.
Yep.
And it's like whatever the drug that Invisible Man took to make himself invisible.
Right.
They're talking about the ill effects and the drugs and everything. You have to remember that like marijuana became illegal in 1937.
Right.
So,
there's a lot of things happening at that time period that was floating around that, there was a question of, I don't know if you should be smoking that. Oh, I don't know if you should be injecting that.
Mm-hmm.
You start questioning, okay, what's the other effects of this? So you can look at it as propaganda if you want, but what I love about this movie, and it's what made Cronenberg so great, because he did the same thing. It was about the science fact of what if.
Mm-hmm.
What if this happens, right? And that's kind of the scenario you get. You don't really get it in the other movies as much. Maybe in Frankenstein, right? What if we bring the dead back alive, right? You kind of get this scenario, the heartbreak. But Invisible Man is a prime example of kind of what Cronenberg made a career out of. It's just taken to another level. But he was always a what if, science kind of guy. What if we do find a cure for cancer, but it's a parasite you put in a body? But what happens if that parasite takes you over, right?
Right. A lot of good stuff. Yeah, like I said, I was surprised at how much I was enjoying The Invisible Man. He was awesome.
Yeah,
and it's a great performance too. I mean, if you remember back, like the best performance in like the Dark Knight Rises was Bane, because he had to do all of that emoting just out of his eyes with that mask on. Well, Claude Rains didn't even have the eyes.
Right.
He's straight up invisible, but he's extremely charismatic. I mean, he fills the screen. He's awesome. So every now and then, you don't even see his face until like the last split second before the credits roll. Like at all. You don't see his face, but him pretty well. He's an awesome character. So,
and what's so great about all of these, and we're going to touch on all of them, but these stories just stand the test of time. It's still something that is relevant. I mean, look how many times we remade this story, all the different renditions and the different names and stuff, but it's still a story that intrigues us, right? Because we all wish we had some sort of powers, right?
Mm-hmm.
In every superhero group, right? There's somebody who can turn invisible and disappear or whatever, right? As a kid, I wanted to be Space Ghost because he had that power, right? Back before he had a TV show, a talk show. But
which was an awesome show, by the way.
oh yeah, it's fantastic, fantastic. But what was it? We watched. I'm getting off subject a little bit. We just covered Rock and Roll Nightmare on Short Bus, and the end of that movie is where the big muscled up rock and roll guy ends up fighting a demon. It's like a hand-to-hand combat, and he ends up choking the demon, and then the demon goes, "I'll get you next time," and he like disappears. I'm like, man, that is a Space Ghost ending right there.
That is awesome.
Because all Space Ghost ever did was he'd shoot some cutter lights out of those little wristbands he had at the bad guy, and then he would turn invisible and leave, and the bad guy would go, "I'll get you next time, Space Ghost." So yeah, I mean,
Awesome.
yeah, I mean it's one of those powers that we always wanted to have, and that's that what if, right? Well, what if you could be invisible? What if that leads to other issues, right? So I don't know, man. There's a lot more deeper to the story than just a dude that turns invisible, because you get that sense of above the law. You get that sense of, well, what are you going to do? I'll just turn invisible. You can't see me, right?
Well, I love that how, he's so far gone that he just like talks to his buddy. He's like, you know what? You're going to be my partner.
Right.
And this is what we're going to do. We're going to like just rule the world. And just, of course, his buddy's just like horrified. He's like, yeah, we're just going to kill a few people here and there. And
that's all.
Make them know that we mean business. And he's just like, ah. But man, you just imagine how chilling that is.
Sure.
He's like, you betrayed me. I'm going to kill you tomorrow at 10 p.m. and there's nothing anybody can do about it.
Yeah.
And they do all of those things to try to protect him. And then he's just like right there in his ear. He's like, gotcha.
Yeah.
And even worse, when he's like, what are you going to do? And he just describes in great detail. He's like, I'm going to unlock this parking brake and I'm going to give it a little shove and you're going to roll and bounce down some hills and then coast for a couple hundred yards till you hit a boulder and then you're going to be on fire. Just cold.
The only problem is you don't think about the fact of this dude's running around naked, though. So I'm like, okay, so this naked dude's going to jump out of this car onto the pavement or whatever, naked. That's probably not the best of ideas either.
Yeah,
but
that would hurt. Well, yes. Plus the fact that it's all through wintertime. Like he's cold, but
it's a strange pair of butt cheeks right here in the snow. What do you think this means?
But man, he lights him up. Like he does not lie. He's just like, here you go.
Right.
I'm mad and you're dead. Boom.
Yep.
And
abuse of power, man. I mean, that's that thing. The bottom line is, and you kind of see that throughout these stories. Those who receive the powers abuse the powers, and that will always be a running theme in life.
It's true, because then you move from that to kind of a more. I'm going to go to Creature of the Black Lagoon, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Yeah. That's straight up an encroachment story. Like that's, he's got his habitat and he lives there and they're exploring and they're actually following up some explorers that got by the creature who's, he's that missing link. And that, again, back with science and the whole evolutionary concepts, and they're, especially back then, they were looking for that. They were looking for that, human something hybrid that they could, tag back and be like, oh, here's, Creature from the Black Lagoon is one of my favorite Universal horror monsters of all time.
I agree.
Those swimming scenes,
incredible.
That cinematography is amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is chilling, man, to watch that too. Even today, you look at that and you go, wow. Mm-hmm. I mean, the fear that we have because of Jaws and all these things, it's amped up just as much in this because, wow. I mean, here's under the water, you can't see what's going on, and this thing is basically mirroring what you're doing, watching your every move.
He's down there just like tickling her feet almost, like and you almost want to think that she would sense him down there somehow, which she kind of does a couple of times. Like she kind of takes a look around. One thing that was striking to me the first time I watched it was how far she swam away from that boat just you're just kind of like in this uncharted tributary out of the Amazon, and you're just like, well, I'm gonna go dive off the boat and swim about half a mile away.
Yeah, we're out here where other people got lost. It's no big deal. I'll just take a quick swim.
But God, she is so beautiful too. She's like
Adams, man.
So I've told this story on Scary Dad, and I'm sure you know it, but we don't have a lot of those guys left anymore. The original Universal Monsters group. Right. And so this was 2017. Yeah, 2017. I was playing around on Facebook, and something came up, and somebody posted something from a horror convention in California where Julie Adams was there signing autographs. Yeah. So I clicked on it. I clicked on her page, and sure enough, she's like in her 90s, but she's still doing the circuit. And but you could go to her website, which was managed by her son, and you could order autographed memorabilia, and you could get it personalized or not or whatever. So of course I wanted mine personalized because I like, I'm not selling this stuff.
This is for you.
I buy this stuff for me. I don't care about future value. This is mine. But I've always been such a fan of the creature, and so I ordered a poster, personalized, and paid for it and whatever. Well, then it didn't show up. So we're talking like maybe a month later. I reached out and was like, hey, sorry to bother you, but I never got my thing. They're like, oh, no problem. Here's another one.
Right.
So I got the second one. And then like a month and a half, 2 months later, the tube was all beat up, but the first one arrived. So it's like, so I got two of them, and both of them have my name in 2017 on there. But I was like, that's pretty neat because then, because I got two kids. So here you go. Y'all can each have one of these. But yeah, so it's up there on the wall. It's To Billy from Julie Adams. It's a Creature from the Black Lagoon poster for the 3D release that came later. But yeah, that's one of my all-time favorite Universal movies, and like she's the bee's knees, and like super sweet. She passed away a couple years ago now. I think she passed away last year.
She was just in another movie that's going to come out this week. Well, not this week. 2 weeks earlier from now. I forget where we are on the schedule, but it's coming out, and we did Black Roses, and she's an extra in that movie. She's in there for, I don't know, 5 minutes or so. But we had a little conversation about her being in that, and she's royalty, man. This Universal stuff is the platform that everything else that still today follows from, and I mean it's a shame that she ended up in a movie like Black Roses, but it is what it is.
The funny thing is, and like my dad will tell me stories about music back, in the 60s and 70s, and how top 40 radio worked before everything got, fractured out so much to where you've got 8 different versions of country music or whatever.
Right.
Studio movies a lot of times had the same cast because they had basically they had an employee pool. These guys work for the studio, and so a director or producer would come in and be like, okay, who do we got? And they'd run down a list of names and just cast people in their movie rather than have them audition or whatever. They're like, okay. Yep. And on the special features for Creature, Julie Adams says, she's like, yeah, I got the call, and it was a horror movie, and I was into like Westerns and romances. I wasn't really into wanting to do a horror movie, but I was a good employee, so I showed up on that first day, and then lo and behold, here I'm still it's the thing I'm best known for. But yeah, she was basically she was an employee of the company, and she showed up to work. She got told where to go. And
I mean, that's the way it used to operate, and the music world was the same way. I mean, even up into the 90s in Nashville, you had what they called the A-team musicians, and that's who played on your records if you're in country. So it didn't matter if you were a band or not. These guys are playing your songs, and your band will play live.
Right.
But these are the guys they brought in that could sit down and they would have your song done in 15, 20 minutes. And that's what they got paid to do. And that was just how it worked. And yeah, I mean, the movie industry was the same. Why take a chance on these people when we got all these people that we can mix and match and crank this stuff out?
I love the fact the story behind the creature concept, how he was designed by a woman, but then the studio head like took credit for it because that's what they
Yeah.
did back then. I'm like, what a jerk.
Right.
But, but she was one of those original Tom Savinis. If you look at her, what was her Millicent something?
Right.
But you look at her office, and she had all those different creature heads and different other prostheses and makeups and stuff. She was pretty awesome. She's a pioneer too. So.
Yep. Yeah. Especially, I mean, that creature outfit with the functioning gills and everything. It's it's amazing, man. I'm still just blown away by that. So yeah, I'm with you, man. He's one of my favorite characters, hands down. And it may be why I was so terrified with Humanoids from the Deep, because it was a knockoff kind of version of that. It's just they took the creepiness to another level, but it was still the impact of, it's one thing to have a beast in the woods coming after you, but this is the unknown and it's stalking you, but maybe not in the normal stalking way, right? It's a little obsession. It's Beauty and the Beast kind of thing.
Well, it is a Beauty and the Beast, but I mean, he was mean before they showed up.
Yeah.
Right. And, like, you can really not tell because he doesn't talk. He doesn't have, he can't, he's a creature.
Another plus.
Right. But he can't explain his side of things. But going in, whenever he kills those guys at the beginning, that they're encroaching on his property and he ain't having it. And
right.
He's not real big on second chances. She's the only one that kind of gets a pass, but you have to wonder if like he thinks she's neat, but at the same time he still sabotages everything that they're about. Like he traps them in the lagoon and he messes around with them while they're trying to get it undone.
Yeah.
He pulls their hoses and he tries to kill. He kills those guys.
Right.
So they finally get away, but they're greatly reduced in number from whenever they showed up. But
yeah, great one.
That's one of those other things too. The Invisible Man, like bad guys were bad guys. You weren't meant to really sympathize with these guys and see their side of things. They were meant to scare you.
It didn't happen until later on.
Frankenstein or Frankenstein's monster. I don't think he really cares.
Right.
which one you call him. But he's one of those that has been he's such a cultural icon. I mean, he's been around since the early 1800s because Mary Shelley was only like 18 when she wrote the story.
Right.
And he's been a serious driving force in horror. I mean, he started it all, really. If you think about it, she wrote the first true horror novel and the first true science fiction novel all in one blow. And and she carried her husband's heart around with her everywhere she went. So she's, like you have these people that like put on strange makeup to try to appear gothy. Mary Shelley was the real deal.
Right.
Which is odd because putting on Frankenstein, watching it last night, watching the opening credits. You want to hear something remarkably sexist?
Sure.
Frankenstein the movie is based upon the novel written by Mrs. Percy B. Shelley. It doesn't even say it's not Mary. They don't credit her. They credit the widow of the poet who drowned.
Right.
That's kind of strange, but
yeah.
I'd never noticed that before. But I was just kind of scrolling through the credits to see if I noticed something. But
wow.
Different times, man. Different
Sure,
times.
sure. Yep. And again, just this movie is just it's absolutely amazing. I mean, I always reference when I talk about effects. I usually end up going back to Fulci's Zombie, right? Because I
Mhm.
always you take Romero's zombies and they are the blue, gray skin, whatever you want to call them, whereas Fulci's look like you could smell them, right?
Mhm.
It's had that nastiness to it. The makeup job and the way that it's shot, and of course, this is early filmmaking, so grainy,
Mhm.
dark, and he looks dead. The sunken in jaws, I mean, just the way he looks is just unbelievable that that's a makeup job. I mean, later on as it goes along, it gets a little more campy as it goes along because you can kind of see how some things are done. But there's some shots in there, man, that are just mind blowing how it looks.
Yeah, and it's Karloff too. Just his
Yes. Yes.
because he does again. He's an extremely stiff character. I mean, he's dead,
Mm-hmm.
but he's
Yeah.
got so much both anger and confusion and frustration and fear and all those things just in his eyes. He makes sounds. He
Yes.
yells, he screams and stuff, but he doesn't say anything.
Yep.
But Karloff's just such a good actor that he like exactly what's going on. He doesn't have to spell it out for you.
Right.
Um, that's when you say the effects, but also just like the set design. It's like
Yeah,
that
it's amazing.
that gothy. The I mean, it's the quintessential mad scientist. He's got the
To
white lab
start.
coat on.
Right.
Um, but just the texture of the
Mm-hmm.
bricks and knowing what you know now about set design and special effects and especially like a lot of us home haunters that make stuff out of foam and it's
Right.
like you can take a foam panel and you can score it with a knife and then hit it with a heat gun and it melts just in that way that it kind of looks like brick and you paint. But you look at the
Yeah.
laboratory in Frankenstein and you realize that set designers have been attempting to recreate that ever since.
Yeah.
Like that's their gold standard for
Mm-hmm.
gothy looks. There's just so much going on. Like even at the very beginning with the funeral sequence, and they've got that just
Yeah.
random skeleton just hanging out in the.
Yeah.
It's just a weird sort of vibe, but it's effective. Like everything in the whole movie is creepy, and it's and you feel bad for old Frankie, man, because he's just laying around dead and
Yeah.
floating, his brain's floating
He
around in a jar. He didn't ask to be brought
he
back.
didn't ask for this. Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And one of my favorite interviews ever, because I'm a big Phantasm fan, which one of these days we'll do an episode about Phantasm, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
But when Angus was talking about the impact of what he wanted the tall man to be, it reflected all the way back to the Universal monsters. And he said, look at the first Dracula, look at the first Frankenstein. How many lines did Karloff have? Very
None.
little, right?
No,
So he was acting through, yeah, I mean, very, very minimal, mostly grunts, right?
mm-hmm.
He said, look at how frightening that was. He said, now, a lot of people say Bride is a superior movie. He said, but look what it starts doing to the character. You start breaking the character down, and it's not as frightening. He said, there's something about the least they talk, the more the mystery you keep, the scarier the character is. And I really think that's what makes Frankenstein work, is because the acting he's having to do without lines is such a
Mm-hmm.
big part of it.
You have to wonder, and I don't know. Did you ever see the remake with Robert De Niro?
Yeah.
I mean, I thought everybody hated on it. I thought it was pretty serviceable. I mean, it was time for an update. I think
Yeah.
the updated Bride with Sting was quite a bit more terrifying. That was a scary movie.
Yeah, it
Um,
was.
but where Robert De Niro's Frankenstein, when he was having the conversation, it's kind of like the philosophical, life and death. But he's like,
Right.
he is the monster, but he's like, I know how to play this flute. I don't remember learning how to play it, but I can do it. And so he's
Right.
got like latent skills that his, prior life had that, so you wonder what's going through Karloff's mind, because his
Yeah.
brain's been in a jar, it's like what's firing in there? What's, is it all
Right.
just, is it blank slate and static, and he's just,
Yeah.
is
Are
he
you bringing back the memories that you had, which again, Romero's zombies, that's what they were reacting to, right? They were dead, but those memories are what they react to. So yeah, I can kind of see where, I've never really put that together from the De Niro version, but you're exactly right. Cause I thought, wow, he's becoming really intelligent all of a sudden,
well, he's playing with that little girl, which, if the movie is so different from the book. I mean, it only kind of just top lines, but even Frankenstein is not Victor Frankenstein in this movie. It's something else. And
Right.
it follows the basic premise, but and this isn't one of those like, oh well, we got to follow the movie. But in the book, the biggest problem was that as soon as the monster woke up, as soon as the experiment worked, Victor Frankenstein saw it as an abomination, a sin against God,
Right.
and ran from it. And
Yeah.
essentially, the monster just sat up and was alone in a room and
Mm-hmm.
didn't have any kind, like, he was not a black or white kind of character. He was just
Right.
a blank slate.
Just a thing. Yeah.
But he was super strong and
Mhm.
made out of corpse parts, so he was like super ugly. So everywhere he went, he was treated like crap, which made him
Yeah.
like. And
Yeah.
this touches on that a lot, because he gets out and he wanders out into the world, and everybody that sees him freaks out. And why wouldn't you? Because he's a scary looking dude. But he meets
Right.
that little girl, and she's throwing flowers in the water. Look, it's pretty. I throw it in the water. He's like, you're pretty. I throw you in the water.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he,
Talking about one of the biggest editing mistakes ever, right? Because the MCAA or whatever they were at that time, the film, uh, people that would decide ratings and stuff, that they would have that scene cut down, and it actually made it scarier, than it was intentionally gonna be. And yeah, think about 1933. Is that what year this was?
Yep.
Monster drowning a little girl. Yeah. That's pretty earth shaking.
Well, and I mean, because in the book, remember, he finally decides, he figures out who he is, and he decides to take his revenge on Victor by taking out the people that he loves. So he like
Right.
takes out his fiance's sister, takes out his fiance. Like he's just going through and strangling folks left and right just to get at Victor, because he's so mad at him. It's
Get back at him.
tale of revenge.
Right.
And this one, there's pretty much one casualty, and it's an innocent little girl. He tries to get the bride, but he gets away. She escapes, like he doesn't get her. But whenever that dude starts walking through the town with the dead little girl in his arms, it's like, uh-oh. Like,
Yeah.
this just got real,
Yeah.
real bad.
Yeah.
But man, that windmill scene is so.
Yes.
I mean, I love how he just tosses Victor over the side. He's just like, like, I'm going to call him Victor because that's what he's supposed to be, Dr. Frankenstein.
Right. Dr. Frankenstein.
Flings him over the over the edge, and
Yep.
like, there you go. But man, that burning windmill. And whenever thing starts collapsing on him and he's all screaming, I mean, the acting, the
Yeah.
special effects, and back then they didn't have
Yeah.
CGI, so that board was really on fire
Yep.
whenever they dropped it on him. They didn't even
Tour de force,
they
man.
didn't have OSHA codes either, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those films that I don't see how if you're a fan of just movie making in general, you have to just wonder at how this was put together, and think about just the impact of it. Not even as it just being a standalone horror movie, but just the fact of all the movies we grew up watching. So many of them were staying up. Teens were staying up late at night, and what were they watching? Frankenstein would be on TV, or even Weird Science. Even we've talked about it on here. I mean, it's alive. I mean, they've got the whole Frankenstein, scene right there in the movie, and that's their basis of why they do what they do. So it's ingrained so heavily in just our pop culture in general.
It is. And so I was in high school because we talked about video games and going to the mall, and I can't remember exactly. It was probably just the Universal Monsters, but there was a fighting game mod came out. It was a console game in the arcade, but it played like Street Fighter. But it had all the Universal Monsters, so it had the Wolfman,
Yeah, I remember
and Creature, and Frankenstein was a big old green dude, and he had on his suit, but then like if you activated his special power, he'd like tear off his shirt and like take on lightning, and it was like super cool. I used to love to play that game, but that game actually, I was mid high school, I guess. That game was like, okay, we're gonna go rent some Frankenstein tonight. We're gonna go watch these old movies because this is awesome. And all of your Halloween commercials always have a vampire, a Frankenstein, and a Wolfman in it. It's like,
yep.
And I would have to say, like American Werewolf in London is perhaps the best werewolf movie ever made, but Landis was inspired heavily by the old Wolfman mythos.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
So you can't get away from the Universal Monsters. I mean, some of them are hokey, and yes, whenever you start getting down to like Abbott and Costello and stuff like that, but even then, that was a hot commodity. Abbott and Costello were like
right.
They were on top of the world. So
is it any different than the way it is in our time? Because look at the endless series, it's Friday the 13th part 48, right? We keep dragging on, and then you get Scary Movie and all these parodies of it. It's not really any different.
Oh no,
we're still kind of doing the same thing as back then, but it really was when that stuff had ran its course, right? And of course, out of that, when you get past the Abbott and Costello stuff, then that's where the Hammer stuff started picking back up, right? Took a few years.
But then, you have the Hammer stuff going back to true horror.
Absolutely.
But then you have, and this was a fun episode when Scott and I figured this out, because I had no idea, but the horror hosts. And so what you had Universal had this inventory of films. Remember, there's no home video. Nobody's got VCRs, so there's no market for them. They're just in the vault, and there's nothing you can do. So Universal reached out to all these local TV stations and said, "Hey, here's all these movies for free. Just show them," because then they could get the merchandising and sell the models and the cars and the the Halloween costumes and all the stuff that went with it. So it's essentially, here's a commercial for ourselves for you to run. And so all of these horror hosts were born out of TV station employees, like the weatherman, or the donut guy. Like, hey, donut guy, go put on a silly mask, but that is a complete cultural thing that's unique. It's unique to America. It's an Americana thing that lasted only for so long, really, up until we had home video. And when
Right.
we could start watching stuff on TV and or on demand and VHS and whatever, the horror host kind of went away.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've still got a few. Still got Elvira, but
Sure.
she's not hosting as much as she's just being her.
Yeah.
You've got Svengoolie, who's still doing it.
Still doing it, man.
But I love that. It's like one of those things, like when Svengoolie announces, "Oh, we're gonna do Son of Dracula tonight," or the creature returns, or something like that. It's just like, oh,
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so much inspired. And then you, like you said, then you've got the Hammer horror. So then they brought back with Christopher Lee,
Yeah.
all those Dracula movies.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll tackle those sometime too. But the first. So let's do this. This will be good. What was the first Universal monster movie that you remember seeing?
It would have to be Frankenstein.
Well,
Because maybe Dracula. I don't. It's hard to say, but I've mentioned this before. When I was about 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there, because it happened over the course of a few years, my dad would just go to the video store and be like, "Okay, this is an education in movies. These are the movies you have to see." So like when you have those lists of like, how have you not seen that? But
right.
like he'd come home with a stack of movies, and it would be like, On the Waterfront, Cool Hand Luke, and The Great Escape, and The Magnificent Seven,
Right.
Frankenstein, Wolfman, King Kong versus Godzilla, that kind of stuff. And it's just like
Yeah.
rapid fire. And we just, especially like in summertime here is so hot, it's like we just kick back, watch movies over the course of a weekend. So, and again, that was over the course of several years that it was just like every weekend, every other weekend, we were watching shows and watching movies and stuff. So it would have been in there. Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, all of those guys. How about yourself?
It's kind of the same story, except it was my uncle. I had an Uncle Jimmy, who took us to wrestling and all this stuff, me and my cousin Gary. So we grew up spending the night together at our grandparents' house, and he lived there with them. And he was just like a big kid, right? So, I mean, he would take us to go see Godzilla movies at the theaters and all this stuff. And we watched, I'm standing here remembering I'm 10 years old, and I watched the first Dracula movie, Bela Lugosi. And yeah, man, I mean, the scenes with the casket opening up and the hand coming out and all that stuff is just so iconic. And it's that thing too of that age of, ooh, I like this because it's a little scary, but don't scare me too much, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as a kid at that point, you didn't understand all the dialogue that was going on. You didn't worry about Renfield and all that stuff. You were focused on Dracula himself, right, with the hand and all the stage, the stage performance kind of stuff. But he was also the person I was with when I saw the first Christopher Lee Dracula 2, which the scleral lenses, the blood in the mouth. Yeah, I was done.
You talking
but there was always something.
You're talking horror of Dracula. That
yes.
Yeah, I got that on a VHS.
Yep.
It bugged the Jesus out of me though, because he's there to kill Dracula. He's got a stake and a hammer. He's like, well, we're gonna take a break and kill this like nothing non-player character chick over here first, and just wake everybody up and piss them all off. Like, well, no, the guy's right there. Like, go there first.
Yeah. Right. If you do that, then you probably won't have to kill the other one. So yeah. But still, just the impact of you said it earlier. How gothic these early films are. Nothing against the Dracula version, because it is the iconic Americana Dracula, but I catch myself leaning more towards watching Nosferatu instead, because it's not so much stage acting, right? Well, actually, it's silent film, so
yeah.
Max Schreck is the creepiest dude that's ever lived. I mean, let's just face it, he is.
They even made a movie about him actually being a vampire.
Shadow of the Vampire, man. I mean, crazy movie. I mean, dude was such a method actor that he thought he was a vampire. Willem Dafoe, man. I mean, fantastic. But yeah, man, there's still something so classic about Lugosi, man, and the things that run through my mind, because you were saying it earlier, for the TV host thing to happen, and you started regenerating all these old movies because of late night TV. In my mind, I think of my cousins and everybody that were a few years older than me that would have all the famous monster magazines and the posters on the wall. That stuff just, I was amazed at that stuff. So when you did get to see these movies and you kind of put that image that was on their wall to actual cinematic stuff, and a horror fan was born, right? And I've never looked back since that point. So it started early on.
I'm gonna say like I'm thinking the same thing. Like I've been a horror fan from, like, there was a time when I would have told you, like, no way, I don't like scary movies, because there were certain scary movies that just, but I've been a fan of monster movies like Jaws. Like Bruce the Shark is a universal monster. Jaws is a universal movie.
Absolutely.
But I've been all about like animal horror and that kind of stuff since I was a little kid. Like, oh, bite him again, dude. This would totally suck for me, but you're on TV, so it's okay. Get him. But I think just that whole love, that there's something just comforting, especially about those old black and white, Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, that shared universe where, obviously Dracula and Frankenstein occur in the same, in the same world. They meet each other.
Sure.
And the fact that you can pull any of them, they were quality. I mean, they were studio picks, which is fine, because a lot of times now with, like, whenever you get to like the difference between a studio and an indie, but the studio picks were made more like indie films back then. You had a docket of projects that were going on, and these projects had a budget, and they had a producer and a director, and they had a, they were kind of more run like a project, as opposed to film. Like, you didn't have all your high-end catering and your 3 years of principal photography and all this stuff that with CGI and stuff.
You got to remember, it's that transition from stage play to movie set, because this is 30s, right? So we've gotten through the late 1800s where film is just starting. You're going through the silent period, and you're getting to the talkies. And even at this point, stage play was still the big thing. You went to see the actual play. So transforming that to this, it's treated just like the play. Hey, we've got so many days to shoot. Here's the sets.
Here's the lines.
Think about, of course, we didn't talk about it when they shot the Dracula movie. They were also shooting the Spanish version at the same time. Same sets. Awesome. Same everything, and they would shoot the Lugosi during the day and the Spanish version at night. A lot of people think the Spanish version is superior. Some things were shot a little differently, but they were shooting them simultaneously, because why not?
Yeah, might as well get your time out of the sets.
Right.
Yeah.
And now you look at the process that goes to making a movie. You got to have a lineup of people that's going to sit at a computer for 2 years and finish out your special effects. And these guys, when they said wrap, that was pretty much it.
Yeah, and then they didn't hold on to stuff.
Right.
That's one cool thing that I saw. Probably told you about this, but there's a pop culture museum in Seattle. And when we were there a couple of years ago, it's a horror. I mean, they've got horror and sci-fi, and they got other stuff, so like you walk through and they've got the Wizard of Oz costumes.
Wow.
They've got the Princess Bride costumes, and then they've got props and costumes from all kinds of stuff. So they've got models that are original to Star Wars, and they've got the 2001, that big long ship with the ball, Like
Yeah.
all of these original props. They've got Pamela Voorhees' head. They've got a Mogwai. They've got Jack's axe from The Shining.
Wow. Holy
They
smokes.
Yeah, I'll send you a bunch of pictures. I've got them on my computer. They have the uh, internal the Necronomicon from Evil Dead, and scripts and all kinds of crazy stuff.
That's
But
cool.
they had an electrical panel, screen used electrical panel from Frankenstein.
Wow.
You know, yeah, dude, I got to show you these pictures. They're
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, you do.
I got to show. I'll put a bunch. I'll do a slideshow and throw it up on YouTube because
I
walking
was
through
about to
this place.
say,
My wife was like, "Hey, do you want to go to a museum?" But we were in Seattle, like in early summer. There's so much to do and so much to see. You're like, I don't want to
yeah.
spend my whole day and like inside. It's nice out here. I want to be, yeah, what the hell? Let's go. And walked in there and be like, that was the best thing I've ever done. This is amazing. It's so cool. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely got to share that stuff, man. That's cool.
there's a lot of it on my Instagram. But anyway, I'll pull them
Yeah.
all up and straighten it out. But yeah, dude, there's nothing cooler. And then then you have all of your again your spin-offs. You have things like Lurch and Herman Munster. I mean, and I think
Right.
that too
Yep.
that comedy thing. We'll have to do a show on probably those two
Oh
franchises
yeah.
as well
Sure.
because again that black and white gothic sort of and I find it ironic that the inside of the Addams Family house was actually pink because of the way it's kind of like with the TV white guitars that are actually yellow
Right.
because if you put a white guitar on screen it looks silver on black and white, so they painted it off white so it would show up white.
Yeah.
If you look at those pictures of the Addams Family house, everything's pink because
Huh.
that's what made it stand out,
Wow.
look like gray properly. um I love that kind of stuff, the special
Sure.
effects type and the way colors are used. And but you just imagine, because Gomez's suit is like this really bright blue.
Really?
Morticia's dress is black, but his
Yeah.
suit is blue and the walls are pink. So if you see a color picture of the Addams Family on set,
Mm.
it's bubblegum poppy. It's super cool. But I love how Frankenstein and the others just kind of
Yeah.
transcended their time. Because how many other movies were made in the 30s that you know of that you can just name off the top of your head that are like,
You got King Kong in there. I mean, that's
well,
kind of your big one,
that's a
right?
horror movie too.
Exactly. I mean, uh, maybe it's because of what we were exposed to as well. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what you pull away from there, right? Um, it's kind of a shame, right? Because you would assume that's the heyday, the early days, the golden years of filmmaking. It's the nucleus. It's kind of like we're the MTV generation, right?
Mhm.
Nobody else will experience what we experienced on MTV. Nobody, because it's done. It's over,
Yeah,
and you can't really make people understand what that was. And I don't think we have an understanding of what that was back then. We get the aftermath and we go, wow, this stuff is still pretty potent. Like you said, some things come off cheesy now. They probably weren't back then, right?
mm-hmm.
And that's just hindsight, right? Things change and the scare levels change because everything gets diluted. But the message overall is still what's so strong about those movies. And and we didn't even really get into the curse of like the Wolfman, uh, the tragedy that's there. I mean, there's no doubt that American Werewolf is my favorite werewolf movie, hands down. But there is no American Werewolf without the Wolfman because
Mm-hmm.
it's the same story. I mean, the guy's tormented by something he can't control. What's scarier than that?
Exactly. Just that's always been one of those things that about the Wolfman and werewolves in general is, again, like you say, the tragedy. It's just like, but knowing that at certain the moon's going to change or some other something or other is going to happen and you're just going to go murder people.
Yeah.
There's no way out. Like, that's just what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
doesn't make for good conscience,
The great thing that Landis did with American Werewolf was that fact of those spirits come back and haunt you until the cycle ends. So it's still playing off the original idea of what, Lon Chaney Jr. is dealing with, but it's just on a whole different level. So, and that's the kind of things that I wish we would see more of. Take the original idea, keep it pretty true, but just give it that extra little thing. Don't try to reinvent the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
When they remade the Wolfman, I had such high hopes.
That's the movie
even
that
with the
made,
words of Rick Baker's going to be involved, I'm like, okay, good, we're getting somewhere. And
well, that's the movie that made Rick Baker quit the industry. That's that. I mean, that's tragic. And you think just because he walked in and he had people he didn't know that would come in with an iPad and tell him to make the teeth bigger, make them smaller, make the snout longer, make them look meaner, make them look more sympathetic. Give them, and he's just like, "Who the hell are you? You hired me to come do what I do,
to do this."
And
right,
it's just, he said it just got too much. Just every time he's pulled into a movie, they won't let him do what he needs to do.
I mean, all he has to do is have a highlight reel and go back and say, "You ever seen this scene in American Werewolf where the dude transforms? Just step off because."
Precisely. I'm right there with you. But yeah, and I hate dogging on modern movies because there are a lot of good things coming out.
Sure.
But
absolutely.
I think sometimes they take these concepts and, again, they don't have a writer. They have a team of writers who are then headed up by a marketing department. And so the story isn't okay, we start off here and then we move to here and then we go to here, and for these reasons. It's like, how many toys can we sell? How many merchandising tie-ins can we do? Is this going to pull a PG-13 rating? Blah, 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 blah. And by the end, it's so convoluted and watered down that you just don't really have a story anymore.
Right.
And
music world's the same way. I mean, you look at how many people are involved that get songwriting credits now in a song versus any time before this. I mean, you have 24 writers on a song now, and you're like,
how is that possible? It's only 4 minutes long.
Right.
And it only has 3 lyrics.
Yeah. Oh, I forget. We had Freddie Mercury. He could just kind of do it all himself. So I mean, it's that thing of, and the movies, it's no different because we've gotten to where it's so overproduced. And I think that's the problem. I think it's because it's lacking that soul, even though we're talking about a bunch of soulless characters here. It's lacking that soul. If you remake Jaws, it's going to suck. Yep. The effects will probably look good, but you're missing the soul of the movie, which is not the shark. And that's what I think we're missing now. So instead of going back and trying to rehash these and get money off of them, come up with your own idea and put some soul into it. There's a time and place for these. There'll never be another Boris Karloff playing Frankenstein. There'll never be another Lugosi. I mean, they are what they are. So making other vampire flicks, okay, fine. Underworld, you know what? I enjoyed a few of those. They're okay.
Lost Boys.
Kills
it.
Yeah. I mean, so we've gotten taste of those throughout the Monster Squad. I mean, these are nice little ways to issue those things in, but not destroy it. Right? So we need more of that kind of concept instead of, I'm going to make another version of Frankenstein. Oh, great. That'll be 15 we've had, and they've all sucked except the original. Okay.
Well, and that's one thing that drives me nuts is, like, as a writer, as a creative, like, I understand, like, but if you take, like, Jimi Hendrix, restructuring All Along the Watchtower, okay, he didn't rewrite the song, okay? Right. The chords are the same, the lyrics are the same. he changed the rhythm and
Mhm.
the delivery, and
The
obviously
soul.
gave it a lot of soul. But he didn't
Right.
he didn't like try to completely replace the entire thing. And I think that's the thing, is that it's the untold story. It's the story you've never heard. Well, there's a reason you haven't heard it. It's because it sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the reason a director's cut is never as good, because you cut out all the stuff that didn't need to be there in the first place.
Right.
It's nice to see as a fan, but really when you get back to it, you kind of go, you know what? I can see why you cut that out.
Yeah, that movie would have been way too long. Well, we are bumping up on the end here because this is the way these things work. I think they're going to cut us off in about less than a minute. So we need to say thank you for joining us for
Yeah.
this, our final spooky episode of the 2020 season. Here in about 4 minutes, we're going to resume our normal programming. So we'll see you next week with another What's Awesome. Join us on all of our social medias. We've got the YouTubes and the Instagrams and the Twitters and the Facebook. Yeah, it's
Everywhere.
It's everywhere. So before they kick us out, we'll just say bye. Keep it awesome.